Welcome back to day 9, training an untouched Barb stallion. So this one's quite a long one. I did try to cut out a few little snippets here and there of just downtime, where I was either getting out tack, changing out things, stuff that just, there wasn't anything interesting going on. So we start again today with some rope desensitization. He's had this before. He's definitely always a bit more reactive on that left side than the right. You'll see when I switch over to the right side, he's much more accepting of it. So I often will start on the left and do quite a bit more, since we've got to kind of play catch up on that bad side. And you can see how much less reactive he is. And it's not that he's completely good with it on this side, but just his reactions are much less. He's definitely way more comfortable with stuff on the right side. So a lot of the stuff is just repetition, repetition, repetition. We have been brushing his legs for a few days now, but again, he's still uncomfortable if I linger down there too long, so I've been working on trying to increase the length of time I can brush those legs before he gets uncomfortable and moves away. He's again still never been aggressive with anything, but you of course do have to be careful because depending on the horse, when they get uncomfortable, this could be putting you in a dangerous position. Again, I've done a bunch of rope work with him with his legs. We've already done brushing on his legs. We've gradually worked up to this point, so his reactions are a bit more predictable. So I'm comfortable going ahead and going all the way down his leg, even if he feels the need to move. Occasionally, he will always move away from me. And again, much more comfortable on that right side than that left. He doesn't move away nearly as much when I'm brushing on the right side versus the left. Now, running your hand down the leg is another step in the process. So of course we did the rope work first. Again, you'll notice next how much more comfortable and then we started adding the hand running down the leg before I start actually asking them to pick up the leg. So I just want them to be able to leave it there with me running my hand all the way down, and being comfortable with that before I ever ask him to pick it up. And again, it really boils down to repetition and small steps. Everything we do, we essentially do hundreds of times until he's totally comfortable with it. And we're still early on in his training at this point, so I wouldn't say he's 100% comfortable with anything at this point, but every day is getting better, as of course initially I couldn't touch him, and then we've progressed to being able to touch all the way down his legs. And again, each day they can be a little bit different. Some days he's better with the hinds, sometimes he's better than one hind than the other. It just varies a lot, so that's where you're constantly assessing the horse each day. You take what they offer, you make notes on how you need to change your training plans, and what you need to spend more time working on, and maybe different ways to approach it. So this is the second time he's seen this breast collar. We did a bunch of desensitization with it the day prior, and that's when he first wore it. So I don't spend a lot of time this day going back through all of that, because he wasn't giving me any indicators that he was concerned about it. He was actually quite good with it the first time we put it on. So I let him see it, I rub it a little bit, but I didn't spend, the 15 minutes I did the day prior just going through a new item with him where I was worried that he would be uncomfortable with it. I'm still watching for any change in his attitude and his reaction that would indicate that he's uncomfortable, and if so, then we would have stopped and gone back and reviewed some more. But since he was pretty comfortable, I just went ahead. He is not tied at this point. I'm not even holding the lead rope, so if he does get uncomfortable, he has that option to leave. And I don't want to take that away from him, make him feel confined to where he'd be more likely to react in a less favorable way. And then again, same thing with the surcingle. He had this on for the first time the day before. And he's a bit more interested in this item. But again, same kind of deal. I'm going to kind of check out and assess what he thinks about it. If he decides he's uncomfortable, we'll go back and do more work with it. And he does walk off here. So we kind of revisit that a bit more. Crows always seem to have the worst timing here when we're about to do something with him that I would like less distraction with. I'm doing, again, just a little bit more with him with this before we go for it, just because he did seem a bit more concerned about this item. And again, we kind of start smaller, kind of go bigger. I want it to make jingly noises so he gets used to that and doesn't spook at that, because if it jingles at the wrong moment and he's not, then that could end up in a bad situation. And when I first started to introduce new things to him, I'd start on his side where he's more comfortable, because it would make it easier for him to accept it on his bad side, his left side. And again, this is the side that takes more time. So once he's a little bit familiar with something, I'll often start on that side, then just spend more time going through it. And you see that, even though we did the same things on the right side, he's a bit less comfortable on the left. So I'm just going to move his feet out a little bit, help him release a little bit of that tension, and then we'll go ahead and, do some more with it. Good boy, that was very nice. You didn't freak out with that. That's a good boy. Look over here. We worked on reaching underneath his belly on a separate day. So again, this was not something that I had not done before with him. He was used to this. He was comfortable brushing his belly, reaching underneath it. If he hadn't been, then I would not have just been able to reach under that easily. And at this point, because again, this is only the second time he's had the surcingle on and had this tightened up, I just want to get that secured with the breast collar, so that if he does go to move, it doesn't slide off around him and scare him, and then we have to kind of, go back to square one with this. So I'm trying to set him up for as much success as we can, be able to tighten this up slowly so it's not such a shock to him, and then hopefully he'll be able to accept it a little easier. Got some good licking and chewing going on there, which is always a good sign. So I do like to give him the ability to move however he sees fit and not be attached to him when I'm adding something like this, just in case he did decide to have a big reaction. Keeps me far away from him. He can do what he needs to do, and then I can come back in and work more closely with him once he's had a chance to kind of sort things out on his own. And this was pretty much the reaction I had yesterday when he walked off, that he was just pretty calm and comfortable with it. He didn't really seem to care. I've got a few adjustment things I need to do with stuff for him here to make it fit him a little bit better. Some of it I can do right away, some of it I'm going to do when it's off of him, because I don't want to push it to a point where he might react. But it's something that we fixed for the next session, so it wasn't so droopy there. But now I just want him to move out, get those feet moving, let him figure things out. And oftentimes what you'll see is their feet will be a little sticky sometimes when they're first starting out with something that they're a little unsure of. So getting them out moving really helps them kind of process it. And also just to release that tension. They often release their tension through movement. This is a pretty small pen, so I don't really have the room to do camera work in here. So we really kept things mainly to just a walk and trot. If we had had the ability to work in a bigger pen, it would have been nice to go ahead and add some camera work in addition to everything else. But also just because his feet are not in great shape, I'm trying not to work him so much that we end up with any injuries or problems, trying to keep it low key, but getting enough movement for him to figure it out, feel it, and not have it kind of sneak up on him later, where he's surprised about something because he didn't move enough. Even though we've done hundreds of approach and retreats, if not thousands, He's still sometimes a little iffy if I approach from that left side. So again, we often focus on that a bit more to try to catch up to his right side with his comfort level. And if you've seen the other videos, you know the flag is not new work for him. We've done all this, but it is new when it's combined with a surcingle now. So again, everything we do, we try to break into small steps, and then combine it after he knows each individual part, so that it just makes it easier for him. So he was really reactive to being asked to back up to begin with. So I really just want one little step, and he kind of gets stuck here and then overreacts. And you kind of have to watch that when they freeze like that, that they're going to have a bigger reaction when they do move. And then he happens to get the rope around his bum, which we haven't had a lot of work with yet, which worries him a bit, but because we've done so much where he stops, he did what he was supposed to, and then he had a nice turn to me instead of having a big meltdown about it. So it was actually a pretty nice reaction to the situation, and it is something that we work on later, of course. We just hadn't done a lot of it yet. But with this backup, I really just want him to take like one step and be okay with that. And it took a lot of time before he was okay with that. And I had to try different methods because some things worked better with him than others. But we finally found something that, as well as with repetition, that he figured it out, and now he backs up quite nicely. But in the early stages of this, it was one of the things that he struggled with the most. They really want to leave in things like this for people to see, how I chose to handle it, whether that was right or wrong, and how it worked out for us. Because they are reactions that you'll see when you're doing training with horses. And this is another one where he's done, this turn on the forehand where he brings his butt around, but he's not done the reverse. And so now I'm trying to introduce something new to him, and he doesn't understand it. And when he doesn't, he gets a bit emotional. And oftentimes when you're first starting to ask for that shoulder to move, they want to go backwards. So I just want to be persistent enough that I can get a step or two and then release. So he starts to understand what I'm asking. And this kind of lateral work with the front end took, again, quite a while for him to get really good at. But down the road, after we started small like this, we now do, full circles where he turns around with that front end. But again, I want to show you, things we were good at, things we struggled with, how things went kind of from start to finish. Because it's not realistic to expect that it's all going to go perfect the first time you ask. You're going to have some struggles. I'd watched a lot of different methods on how to do different things, and I found some things really didn't work at all for us, and I had to go back and revisit and figure out a different way to do it. Other things worked fantastically well, exactly how they were supposed to, and it made my life so easy. But again, training's all about having endless patience. So when he's not getting it, I can't get frustrated with him. I just have to figure out a different way to tell him what I want, because the method that, I'm using isn't working for him. So you just have to be open to modifying your plan, and changing your methods if need be. And sometimes if they're really struggling with one thing, you get to a point where it's slightly better and then you revisit it later, versus getting him super worked up about that one thing at that moment in time. We're a bit too close to the block here, but we've got a step that was slightly more sideways rather than just straight back. So we just kind of went with it, but ideally probably should have reset a bit further away from the block. And since this was his harder side to do this, I was okay taking that for now and coming back and revisiting it at another time. Right now I'm just asking him to flex and not to actually move his feet. So if he moves, I'll continue to ask until he stands still for me. This mounting block's been in here for a few days now, and I haven't asked him to actually walk up to it or really around it. He has investigated it on his own, but this is the first time I'm actually asking him to come up close to it, and the first time I'm actually stepping up on it as well. So it's kind of seeing me from a different perspective. So again, it's one of those things you have to kind of be prepared for them to react, where he might try to run away to the side or something because he's unsure about it. And this was probably too early to ask him because he does know to move away from the tap on his rump, but he's not completely comfortable with the mounting block here, so instead of moving towards it, he moves away. So again, this was something revisited later once he was more comfortable with the block and me being up there, and then he did pivot his hindquarters how he's supposed to then. I did also do a quick session on the other side, but it started to rain quite hard here. So we did a brief session and then took a little break before we went on to some more rope work with his legs. Again, this is something that we've already done before, to get him used to having things moving around his legs, touching his legs, wrapping around. That's a new feeling for them. I'm kind of holding the end of the rope loosely so that if he does decide to panic, I can let that go. And then it's not tied around where he's going to end up getting himself into a bad situation. So we're just doing this on all of his legs. Again, prepping him for actually asking to pick up his leg. And I'm not really adding pressure just yet. I'm just purely adding the movement and just wanting him to stand still with that and ignore it. And you can see how that feeling of having that rope looped around his pastern there really kind of is uncomfortable for him. So he feels that need to move away from it at this point, which is totally fine. I don't want him to feel trapped ever, because then again we're more likely to get into a bad situation. So it's just lots of going through this, lots of repetition with everything, right? And gradually increasing what he can tolerate. And then once he got pretty used to the movement and the feeling of the rope, then we start to add the pressure, because that's a whole different feeling. And again, you're more likely to get a reaction once that pressure is added. So I'd rather do this than just like rope a leg and pull on it, because this is an easier way to ask him to start accepting this. And if it's not crows, it's the town fire alarm that goes off. So again, he should be pretty bomb-proof as far as sounds go by the end of all of our training here. What you can't see right now is that I'm actually kind of slowly working my way to the inside of that back leg, because I've only like reached behind his back legs and around that back leg like once or twice before. I want to do this real gradually, make sure he knows where I am, make sure he looks like he's going to be okay with that before I commit to it, to wrap that rope around, because I don't want to, again, put myself into a bad situation where I could be kicked. So it's a slow process, but it really pays off when you take the time to do the extra steps. You just can't see it very well with where the camera is placed, and I'm not used to thinking about where a camera is when I'm working with him. So I unfortunately didn't turn to show that a bit better. And that's why you don't tie that on the leg, so that if he needs to be able to move, there's an easy way for him to escape from it when it gets too much for him, and then we can go right back to it. I also started introducing releasing to pull pressure here. So you just put a little pressure on the pole until you get a release. And then also, starting to put things over his head. Again, since he has been so head shy, that's a big one. And then, of course, we know that we need to work around with things around his bum quite a bit to get him comfortable. And so again, I'm going to start to do that. Just apply the tiniest little pressure here and see if he can follow that without getting too concerned about it. Again, if I would have cranked on this rope, he probably would have had a meltdown, gotten himself all tangled up, taken off. But because, we're starting it with just nice gentle pressure, and which he responds really well to in general, he tends to have a harder time if you apply lots of pressure to him. He does much, much better with that and is able to follow that around. So again, we're going to do the same thing on this other side, and unfortunately, we kind of turned out of camera there, but again, he's much more comfortable with the lower legs, so it's usually okay when we're higher up, but then once we get down lower towards his pasterns, that's when I tend to see more reaction with him at this point. I'm going to ask him here to pick up his foot with just a tiny little bit of pressure. If I would have used too much in this situation, I don't think he would have tolerated it. So just starting with the least amount needed to get a response.
Good boy.
Again, asking him to drop his head with a little bit of pull pressure and releasing as soon as he gives to that.
I know. We're going to do all kinds of strange movements. We're going to get used to. I want to do this side too. Oh, I know. Did my armpit stink? Good boy. You're interrupting training. We're almost done, okay? Good boy.
So working on some head desensitization, and then again, getting that rope started around his bum, applying just a little bit of pressure to see if he can follow that around and release to that.
Follow it. Way to do it. Very nice.
A little more resistant to this side, but still a pretty good response for his first times doing this.
So good. So good.
This is some roll-on fly spray for his face because the bugs this year are quite terrible. We had a really cool, wet spring and early summer, and I didn't want to start fly spraying him just yet, so the roll-on was a good alternative to get him a little bit of relief from the bugs, but not have to go as far as spraying him down at this point.
We'll give you something, okay?
This was the first time that I started working on touching his ears here, testing out how he'd react to it, and he was pretty okay with it, so that was nice to see that we weren't going to have to do a lot of ear desensitization work.